Welcome to the EuroSSIG podcast, 40 Years of Digital Turbulences from the 1990s to 2030s. Sandra Hoferichter talks to Wolfgang Kleinwächter, who is a professor emeritus from University of Aarhus, where he was teaching a master course on internet policy and regulation. He was also a director on the ICANN board and is involved in most UN processes on internet governance since the beginning of the 1990s. And together we are organizing the European Summer School on Internet Governance since 2007 annually in Meissen. Wolfgang, welcome. You told me that you have already stood up in the 80s for human rights within the UNESCO organization and that Article 19, freedom of expression, is your most favorite article in the Universal Declaration on Human Rights. In this podcast, we will speak about digital human rights, privacy, freedom of expression. Wolfgang, what is your view? Is access to the internet a human right?
My answer is yes. Finland has incorporated in its constitution access to the internet as a human right. But, to having just access to the internet does not solve the problem. The main problems are coming with the use of the internet. And here we do have two big problems and growing problems with two rights which are enshrined in the Universal Declaration on Human Rights from 1948. This is the right to privacy and the right to freedom of expression. To be frank, when the text for Article 19 was drafted, and the Article 19 includes the language that everybody has a right to receive and distribute information regardless of frontiers. So this was like a dream, like a vision. So it was totally unrealistic to ignore frontiers, but the cyberspace, the internet, has created now this universal space where everybody can communicate with everybody regardless of frontiers. So that means the cyberspace doesn't know the frontiers, no barriers, no restrictions from the technical side. But this creates the problem because you have different legal regimes in different parts of the world. And so right to freedom of expression and right to privacy are managed rather differently in the world.
What do you think? Are the universal human rights that we have offline also relevant in this borderless cyberspace?
Also here the answer is yes. The Human Rights Council has discussed this already more than 10 years ago and concluded that people do have the same rights offline and online. There is no difference. So that means we live in one world. And there is no difference between the offline world and the online world. So this is relevant with other legal instruments like the international law, the Charter of the United Nations is also relevant offline and online. And we have now in the Human Rights Council special rapporteurs for privacy in the digital age and for freedom of expression related to the internet. And they have produced interesting reports and a lot of material which makes clear that while we have a lot of human rights problems in the offline world, we have even more human rights problems now in the online world.
And on freedom of expression, what kind of problems do you see there?
This goes back, you could say, to the Middle Ages when Johann Gutenberg invented the printing press, and the technology was used for good and bad purposes. So the freedom of expression was suddenly possible by printing books and printing pamphlets, but not everybody was happy. The Catholic Church, for instance, immediately discovered that it cannot be used to print the Bible, but it can be used also to publish anti-Catholic pamphlets, and they introduced a system of censorship. The index of censorship of the Catholic Church, was valid until the 19th, 20th century. And, with the internet, we have now a much more powerful instrument to distribute information of all kinds, and we have the same reaction. So that means with all these new technologies we have seen since the printing press, we have the same problem. So that with the invention of the telegraph in the 19th century, the wireless telegraph in the early 20th century, with radio broadcasting and television, it's always the same, that people want to have the right to express them freely. But there are powers in the world, in particular governments, who want to control this and fight against it with censorship. Insofar, the problem with freedom of expression in the internet is not so new. And it's the same problem we had after the invention of the printing press by Johann Gutenberg.
Okay, sounds complicated. Do you have an idea how this can be settled for our current situation for the internet?
If it comes to freedom of expression, I don't think so that this problem can be settled. Different people have different opinions, and this will be an uphill battle. Nobody can win. So that means you have new technology which creates new opportunities, and then somebody will doesn't like it. So that means the contradictions are part of the real world. And with all the efforts we have now with the oversight board of Facebook, or certain efforts by the European Union with the Digital Service Act to fight against disinformation and misinformation. So these are needed efforts. I do not say that this is senseless. So it helps, but basically the problem will not be settled. So because we live in a world full of conflicts, and if we have conflicts, these conflicts will be not only in the material world, but also in the ideological world, in the cultural world. And so what we have to do is to learn with these conflicts and to develop a climate of mutual understanding. So that means this is an educational problem. You cannot eliminate the problem, but via education you can reduce the problem.
And will that also solve the problem about privacy education?
Oh, privacy is much different. So I remember when Esther Dyson, the first chair of the ICANN board, in a discussion said, okay, privacy is an invention of the industrial age. In the Middle Ages, there was no privacy. Everybody knew everything about everybody. So, but later, privacy, to have a private life, to have private correspondence, to have your private space at home became a human right. So that this right to privacy became enshrined in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And we have a lot of instruments now, legally binding instruments, which protect privacy, which protect your private data, like the European Union Data Protection Directive. But with the internet, now I think every click leaves an electronic footprint. And so while in the past, you needed a person, a spy, to find out what was going on behind closed doors, today is if you use your iPhone behind closed doors, the whole world will know what you are doing behind closed doors. And so this is also certainly a conflict. This produces a lot of other problems because privacy more or less is gone. So I've grown up in East Germany. We had the Stasi, which tried to find out what are the books you are reading, what are the friends you have, where you are going, what you are doing. And now you have the spy, you have the informal man in your pocket if you go with your iPhone. So, and you tell voluntarily to service providers and also to governments what are your loved books, what are your friends, what you are doing and where you are going. So this is really a big, big problem, and it's difficult to stop it.
And looking into the future, what do you think can be done, or how will this all develop? Is AI rather an opportunity or a threat to privacy? And are the several conventions against surveillance and the new dimensions of face recognition, autonomous weapon systems, etc., what can be done about all this? What is your outlook for the future?
Yeah, it's difficult. As you know, governments want to know what their citizens are doing. Remember what Snowden disclosed, so that the NSA from the United States was more or less surveilling every citizen of the world, even the heads of states of Germany and Brazil, Madame Merkel and Madame Rousseff, the president of Brazil. And by the way, it was a German-Brazil initiative in the United Nations to call for a better protection of privacy, which led to the establishment of the Special Rapporteur on Privacy in the Digital Age in the Human Rights Council. And the first rapporteur, Professor Katanaki from Malta, proposed as one of his initiatives to draft a legally binding convention against mass surveillance on the internet. But governments were not interested to continue. So that means the proposal was never further discussed, and it disappeared from the negotiation table. And so that means there is no interest neither from governments nor from corporations, really to respect these private things. The corporations need your private data for their business. So that means all the advertisement, which is the economic driver now in the digital economy, so will be successful only if a business service provider know exactly what you are doing, what are your preferences, so that you can calibrate the personal advertisement to your personal preferences. And certainly governments, want to know whether you are security risk, whether you are planning a terrorist activity, and, with all this insecurity in our today's world, so this will even become more complicated. And so the outlook for protection of privacy in the digital age is very dark.
Obviously, there is a long way to go, and we will touch upon it in one of our next podcasts on digital economy or artificial intelligence. So stay tuned for our next series, and thank you very much, Wolfgang.
You're welcome.